If anyone listening to me now has engaged with my work before, then you will know that I always like to give a very clear definition of what we're talking about, because this is something I'll come back to later. But I think a lot of the sort of conflict and division we're seeing is because we have definition issues. We're defining things in different ways. If you're working with a different definition, and I am too, we can never come to an agreement because we're arguing about different things. Self-censorship is when you're withholding your speech, your ideas, your expression in whatever form. It could even be physical expression. You're withholding some information because you believe that if you externalize it, if you express yourself in the way that you truly want to, you're going to be punished for it in some way, that there's going to be a price to pay. If I really say what I think, I'm going to be punished. I'm going to be socially exiled. And the language that we use today, I'm going to be cancelled for it. If I truly, let's say you're someone that's from a very conservative community, very conservative family, and you want to dress in a way that is maybe very liberal, a way that is seen as a very Western way to dress, a way that people in your culture are not used to women or men dressing like, you might think that if I do this thing, I'm going to be punished, I'm going to be exiled, there's going to be a cost. So self-censorship, I think, we think it's just about speech, what it is that you're saying, but it's in your entire expression. What parts of yourself are you holding back because you feel that if they're shown to the world or even to yourself, there'll be a price to pay. So it's very fear-driven. I think I want to make that point very clear, that it's fear-driven, because a lot of the time people will say, well, Africa, isn't that just being tactful? I'm not actually self-censoring. I'm just being tactful and reading the room. It's not the same. Self-censorship, by definition, is driven by fear. Please, let's not confuse it with having a social filter. A social filter is a thinking skill that we all use without even realizing we're using it, right? You truly read the room. You understand that certain conversations, you can't really have them with your family because of many different reasons, cultural reasons, generational differences, difference in humor, difference in understanding. But you can have the similar conversation with your siblings who are maybe a similar age. It's discernment. It's knowing your audience, knowing the context, knowing that there's a time and a place, reading the room. Maybe it's too early to make a critique. You need to hold space for someone. This is discernment. It's grounded. So I think it's important to make it very clear that self-censorship is fear-driven. Let's not confuse it with social filtering, which is grounded discernment. I think you discover the difference through practice. I think sometimes even when you're social filtering and reading the room, you might feel discomfort in your body. But I don't think that discomfort and I really want to know your perspective from like a nervous system point of view, like a somatic point of view. I do think that discomfort can be very different from pain. And I think self-censorship will feel on some level like a betrayal because you know that you're not being truthful. You know that you're not being in integrity. You know that you're agreeing with something that you really disagree with, but you're doing so you can stay safe. Whereas I think social filtering and saying, actually, this is not the right time and place, you might feel maybe even a little bit of discomfort because a part of you wants to say something. But I don't know that it would have the same impact, if you will, on your nervous system in the way that truly self-censoring and you recognizing that your self-censoring does. If you're someone that really wants to cultivate courage and true bravery, not out there in the world, but within yourself, because it really does start with you changing your internal environment, which I make very clear in the book, that I think the assumption immediately will be about, okay, let's look at how other people are being intolerant. Let's have that conversation. But you need to have a look at where are you being intolerant in ways that you don't realize. Being intolerant of your own thoughts, to say, actually, I can't say this. This is not a good thought. This is a bad thought. And repressing that. Because in that instance, that thing is nagging away at you and you're thinking, I should have said something. But why do I think I should have said something? I think that's the next step to take to even cultivate self-trust. Where you get curious about your decision to be silent or your decision to respond. So I think it's not a clear-cut answer, and none of this is, by the way, because it requires you to do a kind of a natural level of self-introspection where you feel something and you take on the role of the observer and you say, but why didn't I say something? Was it truly unsafe? Or did I perceive that there was some kind of unsafety in the room? Is it because I've never challenged anyone before, so therefore I'm doing something for the first time? So that discomfort is coming because I didn't allow myself to try something for the first time because I'm so used to agreeing. I think ultimately what I'm sort of hearing, even as we're talking, that all of this is about cultivating self-trust within yourself first, so that you can even be able to discern. Because how do you discern or decide between right or wrong? Was I truly silent because I just didn't have enough information? Or was I silent because I wanted to say something, but I was just so afraid that I might be punished or that there's a cost to my words? But all of it requires a level of introspection that can actually be very fun, because I think it's easy for people to think, oh, but that's a lot of work. Do I have to overly monitor everything that I say and every response I make or every choice of silence? I don't think it's about that. I think it's about cultivating and creating self-trust so that you're able to make clear decisions, you know. When you censor yourself, you're devaluing your experience. You're pretty much saying, and this is unconscious, I understand that, and I want you to understand that it's not a conscious thing. Most of these things are just running on autopilot, old programming that we haven't looked at to think, oh, is this working, or do I need to get rid of it and install something much more useful? But to me, when you silence your true experience, you're pretty much communicating to yourself that it's not valuable, that it's not worthy of being heard, it's not worthy of being seen, that it's better to replicate someone else's experience or what someone else thinks of you. So I would say that for those of us that actually care about the relationship that they have with themselves, if you're someone that does value yourself, and I would imagine that every single person who listened to this podcast, every single person who values open conversations like this is someone that wants to be better within themselves, someone that is so curious about who they are in the world, how they carry themselves, how they treat themselves, the value in which they place on who they are. So I do need you to understand that self-censoring is not just this thing that you might do now and again. It's really important to shine a light on it, because when you do withhold those parts of yourself that are so useful, the good, the bad, the ugly, the joyous, the wonderful, if you're holding that back and not allowing for even one person to truly see who you are, you're devaluing your experience. So for me, when I was pretending that I wasn't in the throes of addiction for a decade, from 14 to 24, pretending that it was just, casual drinking, even though I was blacking out pretty much every single time. Everyone around me could see it. I could see it, but I didn't want to see the truth of it. So even then, I was censoring the truth of my experience. I wasn't owning up to it, to myself, let alone to other people. And I think for me, making that connection to realize that actually, I think I had this idea that self-censoring kind of came later, just through my speech and through things that were happening culturally. But I have done this. I've been doing this since I was a child, to not allow for people to know what I'm really going through, because I think I'm going to get in trouble for it in some way. Because that seems to always be the underlying thing, even as adults, from the age of when you were 6 compared to when you're 45, the underlying thing always seems to be, if people really know what I think, what I feel, what I'm experiencing, I'm going to get in trouble in some way.